Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and at long last, there's a pulse in the Demons 2025 season. After cruising to a 20-point win, we've finally strung together back-to-back victories for the first time since July. Are we back? And can we bring up the hat-trick as we head out west to take on the Eagles? Joining me tonight to answer that very question is George. Good evening, George.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Andy. 2 wins in a row. Can we make it 3? It's going to be very difficult for the Demon fans on Saturday night. Do you want to watch the election coverage or are you going to watch the Demons game? Let's find out.
I don't know which one's going to be more boring. Depends if we win or not. Also joining us tonight, his confidence almost fully restored. I haven't spoken to him properly yet, so I don't know. It's Big Man. Good evening, Big Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demon Landers. 1 week at a time, Andy. 1 week at a time. If a week is a long time in politics, 7 days is also a long time in footy. But 1 week at a time, and I'm not thinking finals just yet. Just happy to take it 1 week at a time. So, it was a terrific game, wasn't it? Terrific to be there. Terrific night at the MCG. Pity you weren't there, Andy.
Yeah, I know. I was telling the guys I had a pre-organised family big dinner we had. Totally out of my control. It was very frustrating watching the scores ticking over on the phone. I got to watch, the only thing I got to watch live was the last quarter, so that was possibly one of the worst quarters to watch live. But I have watched the game since then.
For the West Coast game, of actually going to a mate's Don's party for the election night, and I'm not entirely sure whether, I want to watch it as live, but everyone at the party has to not tell me the bloody scores for that to work. So I'm in a bit of a pickle. Do I watch it?
Do people know you're a fanatical D's fan, that they would, you're up by 10 goals,
yeah. And they all would think, it's so funny to tell him, we won't tell him, but we'll look funny or we'll go, so it's either
maybe I won't tell you the score.
Myself in a room and, or tough it out and watch it as live after, around midnight or something when everyone's.
I'm starting to worry about you guys. One's off to a party when the team's playing. The other's off to a family dinner when the team's playing. What is this podcast about?
Well,
it was out of my control. Believe me, you know where I'd rather be.
And a very good evening to Andy's family, in case you're listening.
No one listens.
But your sister does.
Yeah, she does. But that was not that side. It wasn't the Melbourne supporting side of the family. So you can understand if it was. That's the no-go zone to have anything, without looking at the fixture first. So anyway, here we go.
You missed it really is an amazing night. Like, we're lucky to have that fixture. It's something amazing, isn't it, at night?
Yeah.
But I tell you what, it's something you may not have seen. Well, obviously you wouldn't have seen it, but you may not have been fully aware, Andy. It was super hot. It was unbelievably hot.
Because I was wearing a shirt and pants.
I guess the temperature was the same wherever you were, but at the footy it was super hot. I didn't go
interstate or overseas.
I almost had to take my Melbourne footy jumper off. I had a T-shirt underneath and I couldn't do it, but it was it was a pretty balmy night at the MCG.
Yeah, we don't want any more nights of like that. It'll ruin the ski season, won't it?
That's all right, yeah.
Which this year we may need to go to. All right, well, let's get into some housekeeping before we start proceedings tonight. Each week I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate that feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share their reviews. And Marooned in NZ writes, living in New Zealand means missing out on the buzz of D's footy life, but the Demonland podcast bridges the gap between across the ditch better than anything else. It's not just the match analysis or the updates, it's the genuine passion, the deep dives, and the way Andy, George and Binman make you feel like you're still part of the Demon family. And listening to the Demonland podcast makes each win sweeter and each loss easier to process. And thanks for keeping the spirit alive for us exiled D's fans. Well, thank you for that great review, Marooned in NZ. Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will give you a shout out on the show. And if you follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, and you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, you can do that under our weekly podcast post or just slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. And you can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. Or you can watch and listen to us live, or not live, but on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel and subscribe. And if you want to connect with other passionate D's fans, head on over to demonland.com. Sign up, join in the conversation with fellow D's fans from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And in addition to posting questions or comments for the show, you'll find endless discussions on all things Melbourne Demons. And if you want to jump on the air tonight and have your say on any of the topics that we're covering, give us a call on 039016 3666, 039016 3666. I'll answer, put you on mute, bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. So just hold on. You will hear us talking. You can also call that number during the week, leave a message, and we'll play it on the show. Our chat room, of course, is back. It has been for a few weeks. So if you're listening live, you can join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast and be a part of the discussion in real time. And we do go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. Going to get into the match overview. Melbourne reignited their 2025 season with a much-needed 20-point win over Richmond on ANZAC Eve, producing a dominant third quarter to secure back-to-back victories for the first time in 9 months. And led by another masterclass from captain Max Gawn, the Demons overcame a scrappy and frustrating first half to seize control of the game with a stunning third-quarter burst. And Gawn, who finished with 25 disposals, 34 hitouts, 9 marks and 6 clearances, was simply unstoppable and claimed his second consecutive Frank Checker-Hughes medal for best on ground. And the first half was error-riddled and uninspiring, with both sides struggling to generate clean ball movement. And Melbourne's early 3-goal lead, courtesy of Ed Langdon, Bailey Fritsch and Cade Chandler, was quickly reeled in by Richmond. And after several momentum swings, the Demons entered halftime with only a 4-point advantage. However, Melbourne came out breathing fire after the break, producing some of their best football of the season in a dominant third term. They blitzed Richmond in key areas, winning disposals, clearances, tackles and inside 50s for the quarter. Their forward handball chains and aggressive ball movement sliced the Tigers apart as they piled on 6-1 to open up a match-winning 44-point lead. Christian Petrarca, who's 28 disposals, 7 marks, 2 goals, was instrumental, driving the surge from midfield, while Clayton Oliver responded to a quiet first half with a powerful third term, gathering 13 disposals and 5 clearances. Jack Viney played a pivotal role with his fierce pressure, racking up 15 tackles, 6 of them in the third quarter alone, helping to completely shut down Richmond's midfield run. Down back, Jake Bowey continued his outstanding season, delivering 32 precise disposals and 9 marks, setting up countless attacks with his calmness and sharp ball use. Christian Salem, 34 disposals and 13 marks, and Trent Rivers also produced significant drive from defence, supporting Bowey's efforts to turn defence into attack. And up forward, the returning Bailey Fritsch made an impact with 2 important goals, while Harrison Petty made the most of Richmond's defensive errors to slot 2 goals of his own. Cozzy Pickett, quiet early, lit up the third term with a strong mark and goal to help trigger Melbourne's decisive run. Melbourne's pressure, a hallmark of their best footy, was enormous throughout the second half, reaching an elite pressure rating of over 230 during their third quarter surge. Although the Demons coasted through the final quarter, resting Gawn for much of the term, allowing Richmond the last 4 goals and to narrow the margin, the result was never truly in doubt. And Coach Simon Goodwin would have been particularly pleased with the performance of the club's younger brigade, with Caleb Windsor, Xavier Lindsay and Harvey Langford all contributing strongly, each gathering around 20 possessions, while Judd McVie made a successful return from injury with a composed showing in defence. And the victory, while not perfect, represented an important step forward. For the second straight week, Melbourne showed glimpses of the aggressive, high-pressure football that made them a premiership threat in the years gone by. With 2 wins now under their belt and momentum starting to build, the D's have given their season new hope as they prepare for the crucial weeks ahead. Big man, before you get into your stats files, we do have a question from Dina Kilt, which you can either answer separately or you can answer within your stats. Dina Kilt says, Jack Viney had 15 tackles and elite pressure points, so why was his player rating so low, only 3.3? By the way, a huge shout out to Willow Ratings. You're awesome. I think I have a bromance with Big Man and love the work of Andy and George. Thanks, Dina Kilt. Love your work too.
Thanks, Andy. And I will answer it in the sort of flow of the stats file. Just something about the match is this is something that's really increasingly sort of top of mind for me is, I've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years now, but is the role of fitness and conditioning in games. I've been tracking scores for a long time, and as I've talked about a lot, there's the last season and particularly around the bye period and this season thus far, there's been some incredible variable results. You can really see the impact of 5-day breaks. The Tigers had 3 games within 11 days, came off a 5-day break against their victory over the Suns. So it's really important to remember they beat the Suns, who were previously unbeaten the week before, and beat the Suns with a game plan which was completely opposite to the game plan that they employed against us, which was fast transition from the halfback flank, run Suns basically off their feet, and was really exciting sort of end-to-end, arc-to-arc footy. The reason I raise that is there was a lot of criticism, including from Weber on Demon Landers. Shout out to Weber if you're out there, which unusually critical about how bad the game was and and what the standard was. I really think in that first half, a huge factor in it, and I'll unpack it a little bit this as we go forward, but a huge factor was the strategy that Uze applied. I don't think, increasingly what we're seeing is when you see those high disposal differentials, uncontested in particular, uncontested marks and uncontested disposal differentials, I think the thing to look out for is to check how many days break has been since the previous week. And there's definitely a factor in there around conditioning, because the Tigers, didn't want that game to get into a running game. And it was almost the inverse of our game against the Suns, exactly the same sort of differential, almost the same uncontested mark and uncontested disposal differential. And for, I think, much the same reason, is because we weren't ever going to get into a winning running game against the Suns, and the Tigers weren't in this match. So, if you're a Tigers fan, it would have been pretty disappointing, but understandable why they did it. For me, Uze coached to minimise a loss, not to win, and flooded back, really, really hard, which was a key driver for how ugly that first half was. Like, that was a big factor. They just, their focus was making sure that we didn't get any run from the halfback flank. They clagged up the corridor. They did that. They achieved that by flooding back in numbers and being very, very negative in the way they went about the game, because they just weren't going to allow us to get it on the outside, because we would have absolutely flogged them. And so I think that was a really big contributing factor. Just looping back last week, Demon at WA put a comment in last week's pod thread after the podcast that he enjoyed the pod, but that his head almost exploded hearing loading, a discussion about loading this early in the season, about whether, that question that I was asked about whether is it possible that we're loading already, and I said yes, sort of, to a degree. Anyway, on the back of that, I asked ChatGPT, do AFL clubs start loading early in the season? And the answer was, in the AFL, loading typically refers to a period of increased training intensity aimed at building fitness and endurance with the goal of peaking later in the season, usually around finals time. Clubs can start loading early in the season, but whether they do depends on a few key factors. Number one, team season strategy. Top contenders might load early, example rounds 3 to 8, to allow a drop in form mid-season, followed by a freshen up leading into finals. Developing teams may spread their loading more evenly or focus on skill development rather than heavy physical loading. Number 2, fixture considerations. If a team has a tough early fixture, they might delay loading to stay competitive. Conversely, and I put this in italics on Demonland because I thought it really sort of picked up my point about where we might have been at. Conversely, if they expect easier opponents early, they might load then and accept a short-term performance dip. 3, injury management. Clubs with injury-prone lists might avoid early loading to protect their players. Others with durable squads may hit them hard early to build a base. 4, performance trends. Some clubs historically load in May, June. Example, Richmond under Hardwick was often known for peaking late. Others, like Geelong in recent years, have manipulated form across the season through careful loading and tapering phase. So while not all clubs load early, many do incorporate it into the first third of the season, especially if their sports science teams think they can manage the dip in performance. And it goes on to ask, you wanted an example of a team that might be loading. Thought that was really interesting, just in sort of that conversation about the fluctuation in form and games, and particularly about Geelong. And I suspect, that's in the mix for some of our performances, and in particular our last quarter performances where we've clearly struggled, and in the last 2 weeks we haven't. The score in this match notwithstanding. So. But we ran that quarter out much better than I thought we did. It was one of those examples where when I got home and watched the replay of the game, it was so frustrating giving up those late goals, super frustrating. But, when I actually watched the replay, it was only really the last 5 minutes, 30 seconds of that quarter. We were actually pretty good for the rest of the quarter. We both had 5 scoring shots in that quarter. And if we'd put, we were a bit unlucky with that Cozzy goal not being given. That
should have been a goal. There was no way they could tell. You know how did the umpire call it a goal? The goal umpire?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, there was no way. There was no way, based on the rules, that you could tell that deviated. I'm sorry.
I was going off.
So by the rule, even if it was touched, it might have very well been touched, but there was no way you could tell that it was touched, and I'll leave it at that. But
and deviate was not quite the.
Well, that's the wording they used, I believe.
Yeah,
They did.
They what?
They
used
used
the word
deviate. They said it deviated. It didn't say it was touched,
and it ruined my gag. I was screaming out, no. What do they say? Like evidence, whatever they say.
Insufficient evidence or whatever.
Insufficient evidence. That's what I was yelling out.
That's what it should be. It should have been insufficient evidence. There was no way you could tell that was touched, even if it was. I'm sorry. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was totally. But my point being is that actually that last quarter wasn't. It was coloured really badly by that last 5 minutes of the game. But otherwise, it was actually, not a bad quarter, and we could have, we easily could have. Skipped away with it by 40, 50 points. It was not to say that it wasn't incredibly frustrating. Just to tell you in the kilt, I'm just trying to find the. Just bear with me for a sec while I find the player ratings for this game.
So his question was about Jack Viney, the 15 tackles, a lot of pressure, but only a 3.3 rating. So he just wanted to understand, I guess, probably the player ratings and why when you have such a good pressure game like that, they have such a low rating.
Yeah, so the key thing about the answer to that question is that the way they do player ratings, it's a better not to think of them as like who's best on the ground. The short version, as I said in the week one when I said that I'd highlight the player ratings each week, is that it's a measurement of the direct impact each player has on a game through their actions. So each time they have an action or they intervene in the game in some way that affect either the ball or the ball carrier, expressed as scoreboard impact. So initially came from basketball, I think, is where they calculate a whole lot of different points where when they come on the court, how many points difference do they make to the game? I think that's at least influenced it. To get that measurement, 3 factors are considered for each action: the location of the ball on the ground before and after the action, the situation before and after the action, the difference in next expected score value before and after each action. Actions that increase a player's team's chances of scoring next, example, taking possession, moving the ball forward, give positive ratings, and actions that decrease those chances. Example, turning it over, missing shots at goal, kicking to 2-1, or give negative ratings. So the player rating each player gets at the end of the game is the sum of all of those ratings. And to answer that question, is tackling is only sort of valuable if it then results in a score, for instance, or it ends up being part of a scoring chain. Where Viney, so they get stung they lose points for like those awful kicks inside 50. Like Viney was doing my head in. His kicking was appalling again, back to some of his worst kicking. That is, where he was kicking to 2-1, 3-1. Those turnovers, some of them scored goals from them, or even if they didn't, it negatively impacts the score. So, like, tackling is one part of it, but it's really a measure of scoring impact. It's really about the player's contribution to the score, essentially. And Viney's kicking really would have hurt him. So his tackling was great. His pressure was great, no question about that. And he flew the flag. But that's really what explains that. Now, if you compare him to, and it's a really good comparison, if you compare him to Clary had an equally poor first half as Viney. He had 0.3 points in the first quarter, 0.9 in the second. So he had a horrible first half, Clary, I have to say, and I was really getting frustrated with some of his sort of handballing and defensive running. Again, for me, is a bit of a concern. But we'll unpack this a bit in a sec in terms of our third quarter. But he was immense in that second half. So he was our third highest rated player. Maxi was on top with 19.6, back to his best. Remember, 20 is considered an all-Australian level game. Track was second. He had 17.5, and remarkably, he had 11.3 of those points in the third quarter. Track, just unbelievable impact on a game of footy. And that's where you can really see, to answer Dean Akilt's question, you can really see that in these scores. And Clayton Oliver had 9.4 points in that player rating points in that third quarter. His total was 17.2, his highest score this season. Trent Rivers was next to surprise me a little bit. He had a great last quarter, 15.4, and then Tommy Sparrow rounded out the top 5 with 14.5. But big shout out to Kay Chandler, who had 13, but he's had such a remarkably consistent season. Kay Chandler, between him and Bowey, I think they're our standout players thus far. Well, I guess you've got to say Max. So those three would probably be 1, 2, and 3 in some sort of order in the Bluey thus far. But that's a good, for me, Clary's third quarter is a really good example. He had no measurable impact, in that first half. We weren't doing anything around stoppages, nothing from the centre. We weren't scoring, and that's where his sort of bread and butter is. But he went bananas in that third quarter and was a massive factor in us getting some scoreboard action going, and hence his rating of 9.4. So basically he's got 1.2, 16 points, player rating points in the second half, in one half of footy. It was something to watch. So hopefully that sort of clarifies it. So, I mean, really with Viney, he's got the previous week, remember his rating was up around, I think it was 18 or 19 last week against Freo. And that's because he had a lot more positive impact on our scoring. He kicked goals himself, didn't he, the previous week? Kicked a goal, that goal out running out of the centre. He was involved in more in score involvements and scoring chains, and his actions or his interventions in the game had a more positive impact on the scoreboard. So hopefully that explains it. So his pressure was good, but outside that, his kicking was doing my head in, and the amount of dump kicks. We should have people running past him and Maxi, I reckon, as just a standard play. If they don't use it, they don't use it. But his kicking was terrible. I do a bit different this week. I'll go with ugly first, and then bad, and finish with good. Ugly, the last 5 minutes. So that wasn't great. It really sort of is frustrating in the footy when you want the sugar hit of a big score. Though I can't come at the idea of we wasted percentage, particularly from people who don't think we're going to make the 8. So it doesn't really matter what our percentage is if we don't make the 8. 3 of the 4 goals that we gave up were from turnovers, and one really frustrated me. I mean, Rivers turned it over, didn't he? He kicked it straight to one of the, that happens, mistakes. The one that frustrated me, to be honest, though, was Salo's decision. He had a give to Tommy Mack, and there were free players out on the MCC wing that just would have chewed up another couple of minutes, and that would have been that. But he elected to turn back inboard, and a right foot little dinky kick that he didn't even hit to Langdon, which turned, that created one of those goals. But we only gave up 28 points on turnover. So it's worth noting that, because 18 of them were 3 of those 4 goals. So 18 of our 28 points were in that last bit of the quarter. Ugly, I thought, was it must be a coach killer. Coaches must hate this. But giving up 2 goals in the last 70 seconds of the first quarter was definitely a shocker, albeit, one was an umpiring howler. But nonetheless, God, you hate that. And I could see on the interchange bench the clock ticking down, and I thought to myself, please don't give up a goal. They gave up 2 from that time.
I have an interesting anecdote from my night. So there was a bit of a break in sort of the dinner we were having, and I was able to get KO out and was just having a look, and just had a look at the scores, saw a couple of minutes and saw that first goal, and then, it was 5 seconds to go and there was a ball in, and saw the scores. Happy enough with the way we were going. Turned it off, thinking there's no way they're going to score with 5 seconds to go. And then a few minutes later, when I just checked the scores at the start of the second, just as the second quarter was starting, imagine my surprise. Typical Melbourne. Must have given up a goal right at the end.
So frustrating. And it wasn't real. I don't think it was a factor of tiredness. I think one was a shocking. There was a couple of errors in there. One was actually, to be honest, I was bagging the decision. I didn't actually see it. So, I'm assuming it was bad. I don't know. So,
you know what?
It was.
You see it. You see it happen so many times. It probably 9.5 times out of 10, it doesn't get paid.
Yeah, it was. So that's really frustrating. But that means, though, the interesting thing about that they only kicked 9 goals for the match. So 6. So of that, so 2 of them were in the last 70 seconds of the first quarter. 4 of them were in the last 5 minutes in a bit. 5 minutes 20 or something of the last quarter. So meaning in 7 minutes of footy, they kicked 6 of their 9 goals, which means that there was 118 minutes outside of that. They only managed 3 goals in the 118 minutes of footy. And that speaks to my point about the approach Uze took into that game. And there would not be a person in football who would be better placed to negate any tactics that Goody could throw at an opposition than Uze, given he was an assistant coach for 3 years. It was 3 years, wasn't it? 3 seasons. He was his right-hand man for 3 seasons. So they played definitely very negative. But that's a remarkable stat. So 3 goals in 118 minutes on what was pretty good conditions for footy.
It sort of also tells you just how bad Richmond are, especially when you look at the Casey result as well. They really have no depth other than what they've got leftovers from 2020.
Well, again, though, I don't know that it follows, George. Not when there was clearly fatigue was a factor. There's no doubt fatigue was a factor. A young team. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not necessarily the case, but they did beat an unbeaten Suns unit that just the week before, so they can't be that bad.
And I told you that why that was, because the Suns had to play in 35 degrees the week before.
Yeah, but nonetheless, they're not
and Richmond didn't.
Yeah, I mean, they still beat them.
And Richmond just fell over the line. The Suns almost snagged that game.
Yeah, they ran out of puff, and that was a factor. But, I just don't think that you can say that this game is evidence of that, because otherwise you say, well, they beat an unbeaten side the previous week, must be at least counter to that. So, I don't know that, I think there was a lot of talk about their young players, but we also had 4 players playing in their first or second season in Windsor, Colt, Lindsay and Langford, didn't we? So, they had 6 or 7 or something.
And just on that, Lindsay, I'm not sure if you're aware, he's got the Rising Star nomination this week.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised, to be honest. I don't think it was that good a game. But geez, speaking of Lindsay, God, I love he reminds me of Browning. Do you remember Browning for the Swans? Just in his smooth moving and left footer, and he just doesn't miss targets. He looks like he's got time. I really like the way he plays. So they're the ugly, bad. This was curious because this happened to us last week as well. We gave up. We only scored from around the ground stoppages, 2 goals, 3-15, and we gave up 5 goals, 4-34, which was curious. Down 19 for around the ground stoppages. Kind of curious given how sort of dominant Max was in this game, the best player on the ground. And I mean, Nankervis is an underrated ruckman. He's a pretty good ruckman, isn't he, George?
Yeah, he's one of the best, but he's not very tall, but he's very strong, so you don't get too many advantages or hit outs to advantage against him.
Yeah, and I wonder whether...
And he's also surprisingly mobile. And you forget the last goal that he got, it was because he ran the length of the ground, so he's... people underrate him because he's only 200 centimetres, but he certainly contributes a lot to the side, more than most other ruckmen of that side. Yeah,
exactly. And so I thought, but I wonder whether, I don't know, because I've got none of the footy shows have, and I watched the footy shows or some of them this week, and it just does my head in, the lack of depth of analysis. But I'd like to know what we're doing differently, because I wonder whether we're actually bringing an extra to the stoppages, whether we're not doing that. And the Dogs are bringing an extra. I only know that because I said it on the coverage. But so I don't, whether there's an explanation for 2 weeks in a row getting smashed for stoppages around the ground. Maybe it's to do with us tagging and using Viney as a tagger, or I'm just not sure what that's about. So in any case, it's not a great, particularly with our midfield players, but it's an interesting one. That's 2 weeks in a row we're given up way above our average for round the ground stoppages. This one was also, I wasn't sure whether it's bad or not, but points from defensive half, we're averaging 24.4 for the season. We got 24 in this game. I expect that Goody would have wanted more, and we want more from the back half. But I think it really speaks to the Tigers flooding. They really flooded back. You could see it at the ground. Maybe you can't see it so well on television, but you could just see how they just really were focused and flooding and clagging up our forward line. And, so it was so different. Like last week, Cozzy had that whole inside arc by himself for a period of time. He was 1 out inside 50, and that's the way Freo allowed it to be because they weren't flooding back. He had no space inside 50 in this match. We gave up season average 38.7. We're giving up points from defensive half, and we're bang on that in this match, 38 in this defensive half, which, is not too bad, except when you think of their final score. They scored 63, so more than 50% of their score was from the back half, but, maybe that's a function of the way they played as well. So to the good, don't worry about outside the other quarters, the first, second, and fourth. Don't worry about that. Our third quarter, the premiership quarter, 6 goals, 339. We're plus 14 for contested possessions, plus 20 for tackles, plus 6 for clearances, plus 8 for inside 50. A notable shift, as you noted in your summary at the top, Andy, was our use of handballs. We had 58 kicks and 58 handballs in the third quarter, and you contrast that to the first half where we had 126 kicks and 76 handballs. So we were really using those forward handballs. That's the way Goody wants to play. That's the way Collingwood are currently playing, really looking to run forward with handballs and handballing first and looking later. Almost Gawn is doing it all the time. Our leaders, our senior leaders, I couldn't believe it. I watched First Crack this week for thinking that we'd get a little bit of a rap. The only comment we got was right at the end of the show was David King basically saying, without Gawn, is there no Melbourne? It's like, come on.
You're listening to David King again, Bean Man.
Oh, no, what's going on?
Going down a very dark path there.
It was just like, well, you take out the best ruckman ever. Of course, you're gonna, you're gonna signal the cues in the rack to one extent, but also, of course, it's going to impact you. And I think we'll talk about this a bit later. I don't know. but Fullerton
we've got a
got
question.
absolutely smashed by Nankervis, didn't he, in that period? But our leaders, so, I find it a bit counterintuitive criticising our leaders. Our leaders in that quarter, Track had 11 disposals, 5 score involvements, 2 goals. Gawn had 11 disposals, 6 score involvements. And Clary had 13 disposals and 9 contested possessions. And that's why his player rating was so crazy. This was a great number for us. And on the back of last week, we scored 7 goals, 8. So we could have even been more, 50 points from turnover. So if we'd kicked a bit more accurately on turnover, it would have been even more to 4 goals for 28. So plus 22 for turnover. Awesome. Really fantastic against the season average. So 50 points on turnover against a season average on 36. Our season average we're giving up on turnover is 49.1, and the Tigers could only manage 28 points on turnover. It's all a function of one thing. And Andy, if you were willing to spring for paying for a soundbite, then I'd be playing, or there's any number of songs I could pick for pressure. But, pressure. Goody has spoken about he hopes a renewed focus on pressure can be the turning point in our season. And what a game for pressure. So for the match, 193, we were plus 32. You don't lose games of footy when you're plus 32 for pressure. Came out firing. We're plus 42 in the first quarter. I thought we were well on top, so it was really frustrating. I thought we were well on top for the first half, to be honest. So it was super frustrating that they were in front actually at halftime. But we were plus 42 in the first quarter, plus 15 at 190 in the second quarter. In the third quarter, we at the end of the quarter for the aggregate for the entire quarter was 219, plus 55. Would you believe it? And when you're like live at the game, I don't know about you, George, but it was just you didn't need any Fox pressure rating score. You could just see it. It was unbelievable, though, our ferocity. We just went out there to spank them, and we did. So plus 55, I'm going to have to ask Wheelo, if you're listening, Wheelo, can you let us know, is that one of the biggest differentials ever recorded? I mean, plus 55 is bananas. We ended up 178 in the last quarter, so it wasn't actually too bad. They were only 157, so it was still plus 21, 193 for the match, plus 32. Our top 6 pressure players were Tom Sparrow, Jack Viney, Clayton Oliver, Spargs, Cozzy Pickett and Track. And importantly, I think it's worth noting that 3 of those players are forwards. And it's been critical to the turnaround. Well, let's not over-egg the pudding. It's been critical in our last 2 wins, that pressure. As Goody said, that that's really been the sort of the focus in the last few weeks. The third quarter, at the 9-minute mark, over the first 10 minutes, we had a pressure rating of 263 to 187. So they came out, they were still going. The 187 is above AFL average, which is 180, which is what's considered the benchmark, not average. We had a pressure rating of 263 in the first 10 minutes. That is unbelievable. And as I said, you could see it. You didn't need a pressure rating monitor to see it. And it was just unbelievable. That was the full quarter, which was 219. Our pressure rating was the 5th best pressure rating of any side in the last 5 years. So the 5th best pressure rating of any team in the last 5 years. We came out in that third quarter and blew them off the park. At the 19-minute mark, we'd already had 12 forward 50 tackles in that quarter, the third quarter, the last of which created the goal to Sparrow after tackling Amos, which was a terrific bit of work. Since 21, Melbourne's only recorded more than 12 forward 50 tackles in a quarter on one occasion, which was the opening round against Sydney last year in 24 when we had 13. So we had already almost matched that 19 minutes into that quarter. And just on pressure, just a sort of another indicator of how incredible our tackling has been inside 50 in the last 3 games, and it continued in this game. Over our last 3 games, has been the 3rd largest ever tackles inside 50 differential across 3 consecutive games, going all the way back to 2012. Cats had 46 in 2000 between round 14 and round 16 in 2013. Saints plus 45 between rounds 20 and 22 in 2017, and the Ds plus 43 around 5 to 7 in 2025. That's serious heat, which will, again, that with that sort of heat, you're going to beat most teams. Just on the curious front, we had 423 disposals, our highest number of disposals since round 16 2023, which speaks to, I think as much as anything, the way the Tigers wanted that game to, the way they set it up. Again, it was very similar in vibe to the way we played the Suns. But also indicative of the way we want to play. We were happy to chip it around. We were happy to move it around. If it's in our hands, it's not in their hands, they're not scoring. And that seems to be a real theme in footy at the moment, a combination of holding the ball up and chipping it around until you get the green light to go, and then going fast, combined with periods of just going fast. It seems to be what Collingwood's doing. It's what we're doing. It seems to be the model at the moment.
For curious bin man, I thought the most curious thing in this game was Ed Langdon's 45 metres gained for the whole game.
Yeah, which must be really small for him.
It's about 1/10 of the normal.
Yeah, that is one. But just while I think of it, George, one of the I was going to ask you. So this is a question without notice, or one of the curious things was just quick looking at time on ground. And the way they're using Clary, for instance, they're starting him on the bench, and they're also using. And I was going to ask whether at some point over the next, whether next week or is for you just do a bit of analysis on the timing ground, because I haven't looked at it, but I'm really curious as to whether we're using the bench as part of that sort of conditioning stuff, and maybe how we're using Track and Oliver in particular, but definitely Clary. I'm not sure what his numbers were in this game. I'll have a look in a sec, but in terms of percentage, but maybe that's the way to use him until he can get to somewhere closer to optimal fitness, because he's still struggling, with his running power, isn't he?
Just looking at it, we seem to have a better spread than what we've ever had before. There's a lot of players now around about the 70 to 80% mark. I don't know whether that's caused by having people like Colt and Langford, her doing less minutes. But there's some really strange numbers starting to pop up in those areas. Clary was also tagged by Hopper for a good part of the game. So whether he's off the ground deliberately to open up, take him out of the play, and let's see where Richmond's fourth best midfielder is, because I don't think they have a fourth best midfielder. Just as a tactical move, so difficult to say just on numbers.
You're on mute, B-Man. You can't hear me. B-Man, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. I don't know how I did that. I should. My wife wants that function. That was really curious that they chose to tag him. I would have thought, but I suppose it speaks to his potential ability to get those key critical clearances. And certainly, I don't know if they released the tag in the third quarter, but if they did, it was a monumental error. And I'm just looking at the numbers. So he 76% game time. Interestingly, George, it was ended up only being 77% for Maxi. Harvey Langford 78%. Xavier Lindsay only 70%. So own at the top. No one did 100% for us. So 92% was the most Tommy McDonald. And it was Langdon. So Langdon only 81%. So for him, he might as well have not played.
For Langers, though, they were running him through the middle as well. So for a while, and as part of the rotations, they'll just take you off. I don't think they'd run him through the middle and then put him back on the wing. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting the way they used the wing too, because Langford was on the wing for a little while.
Yeah. There was all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Yeah. But I think Hopper only got 4 possessions for the whole game, something ridiculous.
And did Viney go to Taranto?
Yes. Yeah. Viney. Yeah. But like I said, it wasn't so much tagging; it's about close standing, I suppose. He didn't really stop Taranto by any stretch. Yeah. He was still one of their best, but I thought if there was ever an example of a complete failure of a tagging, if that's what you want to call it, have a look at Hopper versus Oliver.
Yeah. It was the one thing I'd say about like Viney. Back to Dean the Kilt's question. That tackling, what he was good at on the weekend, he was tackling to hurt. Like he was really, some of the tackling was hardcore, and so they're definitely looking like running on top of the ground better, and they're looking fitter and stronger at the moment. There's no doubt about that.
Right, let's get into our questions. D Minion says, I know the game was essentially wrapped up early in the final quarter when we pushed the lead out to 44 points, but is it a worry that everything seemed to fall apart once Max was rested? We conceded the last 4 goals, and during that period, our skills, execution and overall system completely broke down. It really took the shine off what should have been a comfortable and enjoyable win, especially given the season we've had so far. And let's not forget percentage could matter. I know it might sound like nitpicking, but the last quarter left a sour taste. Buck Naked says, 4 goals given up at the end while resting Max and May. Was the queue in the rack? Do you think this is part of a long season approach, or should we have put them to the sword and boosted our percentage? Pingu says, taking Max off in the last quarter was obviously a strategic move given the scoreboard, but considering we won't be in that position often, how should the coaching staff balance player load management, especially in games that aren't already secured? Palace D says, the past 2 weeks have given us some hope, when before there was little. Fast-flowing, attractive football with a semblance of system, albeit in patches. At least one obvious concern remains, however. The question I raised here 2 weeks ago and by others this week are our last quarters. After 7 games, our total score kicked in last quarters is 7 goals 20, 62, to 33 14, 212. Our percentage for the year is 74.7%. Our percentage based on just the first 3 quarters of matches is 96%, whilst based on last quarters alone, it's 29.2%. Max hasn't gone off every last quarter this year, so to use a new 2025 catchphrase, it is not an event, but a pattern. The difference in last quarter accuracy emphasises a fitness issue. As we tire, we spray our shots and lack the capacity to prevent the opposition from getting opportunities from close range. We are letting our opponents off the hook psychologically as well. No team playing us will feel beaten at 3-quarter time, no matter what the score. It must also play on the minds of our players and coaches as we expect to run out of steam. It is no use planning to peak in September if we can't qualify to be there. Hopefully this is being treated as seriously as the ball movement and all the other components that make up a winning team. Sir YU Little says, final quarters are still a major concern. I don't mind Max being rested, but the team can't just fall apart when he's off the ground. Goodwin and the coaching staff still have major work ahead, especially in developing a plan B. And Travi14 says, good win and some promising signs. People shouldn't read too much into the last 10 minutes of the game. We shouldn't have, but did put the queue in the rack, and I don't think we will get too many opportunities to do that. Dina Kilt says, you've mentioned many times Goody's game style is taxing, and your explanation makes a lot of sense. Our 3rd quarter team pressure rating of 219 was immense, worthy of a grand final. I believe the TV commentator said the team pressure rating was over 230 in the 3rd quarter. Perhaps this, together with 3 games in 12 days with 2 crucial tools in Max and Maisie off a good chunk of the 4th, helps explains the last quarter fade out. So George was a cue in the rack late in the game, as some are suggesting, big man saying it. It certainly looked like it. Or is actually something a deeper issue, fitness concerns we've been noticing for weeks now? How big a problem is our inability to consistently run out games, or is it just simply a matter of no Max, no Melbourne?
There's a fair bit in that. Again, we've talked, Binman's talked briefly about fitness as well, and we've talked about it in the past couple of weeks. And given the numbers that are there, there has to be some sort of credence given to the fitness question. It's certainly not running out the final quarters, but I'll leave that one open for Binman in particular. The question of Max coming off and May coming off, I think, highlights one of the fundamental problems that we've still got, is that what is our backup for Max? I'm afraid Fullerton isn't the answer, and I'll never suspect that he was going to be the answer. Unfortunately, I don't think we've actually got any long-term prospects as well coming through in terms of replacement for Max. Max can't be expected to play 24 games in a season. He's got to get a break at some stage. He's got to either get a break in games, or he's got to get a break between games. And at the moment, I don't think we're showing that we've got the plan or the capability, at least, of being able to provide either to him. He is such an integral part to the way we play. The important thing for Max is not so much hit outs and things like that. Max is playing well when he's taking marks around the ground. That's what we need him to do. But as the season goes on, that'll become harder and harder for him. He really needs a cutout. It's no use giving him a cutout for 5 minutes in a quarter. It's just not enough over the whole season. So I really don't know what the answer is, and I think we're going to run into a serious problem if Max gets either injured or he's forced to ruck for the whole season. It's just too hard a job. They have to come up with something better.
Yeah. I've been saying for a long time is that, well, certainly not in Melbourne. I don't know about beyond that, but in the time I've followed footy for the Ds, there's no question that in terms of the most influential player is Maxi. Like, if that's been true for the last 6-7 years, hasn't it? He's going to win his 8th All-Australian this year. He's a walk-up Hall of Famer. He's unbelievable. It's a bit like, having the very best player in the game and saying, well, you're not going to be as good when you take him out. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? So, but of course, our whole game is structured around him. I thought one of the strange things about this game was, particularly given, and maybe again it was a function of the way they flooded back and didn't want to get into a running game with us because I think they were more gassed than us. But particularly given how well Uze knows Melbourne's setup, they still kept on kicking it to Maxi. And I think your point's a really good one about when he's in good form, he's taking good marks, and he was dominant. He was cleaning, he was taking them clean, he was getting in good position. But, geez, it frustrates you if you're an opposition fan watching your team kick it to Maxi. I actually think, as I said before, this was probably the best we've run out of game. I don't think we put the cue in the rack as such until the last 4 or 5 minutes. We could have easily, Fritter, that was not a good option to not give it to Spargo. There's a goal gone there. They shouldn't have turned that goal over to Cos. We missed a couple of others. I think we kicked 1-4. So we had the same amount of scoring shots, and as I said, it was plus 15 or something more maybe for pressure. So I thought we actually ran it out. But it's a good point that one of the question about, I'd forgotten until I watched the replay because I saw Maxi come off and I knew they weren't going to bring him back on. But May was off for ages as well. So he was off for at least 6 or 7 minutes. So
his might have been, he hurt his ankle earlier in the game.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll just...
but played better seemingly afterwards. I mean,
no, I know, but you want to rest that ankle. Yeah.
The Lynch May thing was a fascinating. Like, Lynch, as much as I dislike, he's a terrific forward. And, it must be said, one of those 4 goals, 3 were turnovers, but one was just a brilliant goal from the boundary line by Lynch. I mean, he is some sort of football. And it's interesting watching May, the way he plays, because he always takes an aggressive position in front of players, and he got hurt, a couple of times where they were able to get it over the back. And, that was a really good battle to watch. But, yeah, I thought actually our fitness wasn't too bad, and I was just looking at the tracking numbers. I thought we run out this game probably almost the best of the season, to be honest. It wasn't so bad against Freo either, but I think it was not bad. Richmond did really well in all of those work rate things. They're actually surprising, the numbers. They had, split, either 3-2 in most of them. But the one that sort of stood out is work rate, average speed and defence. And it's actually a stupid name, as I've said before. It's average speed and defence means average speed when the opposition's got the ball, which is really a great way of looking at our all-team gut running and team defence, because it's that spread and shutting off exits and all of that hard work of, not letting the opposition move the ball quickly. Top 5 players on the ground for average speed and defence were all Melbourne players. Lindsay, Tolstrup, Bowey, Clayton Oliver, and, well, that surprises me, and Langdon. So we really worked hard defensively, all-team defence. The Goody would have been thrilled with that.
All right. Lazy asks, do you guys worry that most of our scoring was from stoppages? Are you seeing enough in terms of scoring from back half transition? On the plus side, we seem to be back to a high level of scores from turnover. Big man.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, like watching a lot of games, there's the sort of fast, lots of scores from the back half. There's always going to be a response from the coaches. It wasn't there. And there was in this game. It wasn't a game in which we could score much from the back half because, as I said before, is the Tigers were so focused on flooding our defensive zone, which hurt them on the counter, but also made it difficult for us. It's really interesting looking at some of the games. I think that coaches are looking at alternative ways to, like scoring from the back half is important, but it's really scores from turnover. That was the big number for 2 or 3 seasons. It's only in the last couple of seasons that, for instance, Daniel Hoyne's been talking about scores from back half transition being, really important. They are important. I'm sure Goody would want more. But, the turnover is a sort of direct correlation to how much pressure they're applying. And that sort of the numbers that I just read before, the defensive running, that's how you get turnovers. You get across to a contest. You spill one that otherwise would have just been an easy sort of chip around, or you work hard defensively. The stoppages one's curious, though. That's come back into vogue a little bit in importance. And Carlton's win was, interestingly, they've gone back to the well on wanting to be just a high-pressure, high-contest game, and their win over the Cats was all about the number of stoppages they won and their ability to score from stoppages. So, if you watch that presser, watch Scott's presser, it's hilarious, really, the way they got smashed at stoppages, both in number, like that's less important, but scores from stoppages was a big factor in that game. And so I just wonder a little bit whether there's already a sort of swing against the high, fast transition. Coaches are already finding ways to make that more challenging for teams, and whether whether scores from turnover and stoppages will sort of become a more significant indicator like it was in the last 2 or 3 seasons.
I think there actually has been a dramatic change this season in the way that goals are scored. Apart from the question of turnover can happen at any time over the ground, but you're not getting the entry into the 50s like you used to when you got the turnover. If you go back, for example, to our grand final win in 2021, we had somewhere between 11 and 13 kicks inside 50 that were marked that resulted in goals. In this game against Richmond, there were 1 to 3, depending on what you consider to be that. So there's been a real change. You can get the turnovers, but you've got to the scores once you get it inside the 50 are coming from contest and from scrimmages and from crumbing.
Yeah,
they're not from marks, and we'll talk about it later. That's affecting certain players in a big way. Players who used to depend on getting the ball delivered into the 50 and marking it aren't getting the opportunities anymore. It's going to be the guys on the ground doing the hard work.
Yeah, that's right. And so that, to me, is partly a coaching thing, because that high transition game that was sort of even in the early part of this season, like those big scores that were being racked up were because they were all teams were pressing up high, and once it got out the back, then you were to the races. But then teams aren't pressing up as high. We were pressing up quite high in this game. May was way up the ground a lot of the time, and we were and so teams are squeezing again. And as you say, George, they're trying to. Defenses are creating congestion in the forward line. Ball's hitting the deck a lot, and it's those medium forwards are the ones that are really. And Collingwood, the team that sort of introduced this high tempo transition footy, they're playing, like I said, very similar to us. But it's swung a bit back to pressure's still king. Doesn't matter. It's all about pressure and contest and winning clearances and winning that pressure count. It's so important. Does raise the question. How it goes back to the question of 21 and 22 and 23 for us. can you play that way for the entire season? And the answer is no, you can't. Like, it's just too taxing to be up around 200 pressure rating. So I think my point that I wanted to flag before really about these variable results is we're going to have to, as footy fans, we're going to have to accept that Geelong can come out and get beaten by the Blues, or that the Tigers can beat the Suns, or that Hawthorn can't run away from West Coast, or, there's already been weird results, and there will be all season, and it's because you can only peak for 2 or 3, games, and then you have to ease off, I think.
Smurf says, can we take a moment to give some well-deserved kudos to Jake Bowey for the fantastic start he's having to the 2025 season? After his brilliant entry into the AFL, including the incredible 17-game winning streak, it felt like his development plateaued a little, and at one point he was even dropped to the twos. Last year, after getting injured in round 1, I thought he struggled to recapture his best form. Fast forward to this season, and Bowey has been nothing short of outstanding. To put it in perspective, he averaged 17 disposals per game in 21, 16.71 in 22, 16.13 in 23, and 16 in 24. So far in 2025, he's averaging a massive 24.43 disposals per game, including a 32 possession effort this week, the second highest of his career. At this rate, he'd have to be right up there behind Max Gawn in the best and fairest standings. Well done, Bowser. Supreme Demon says Jake Bowey also deserves some credit. His game was fantastic in that quarterback role on the half-back flank. Would Jake Bowey be currently leading the best and fairest for the Demons? We've got some audio from Rose Star. He ends with some stuff on Bowey. He's got some other things to say as well.
G'day, boys. Rose Star here again. Yeah, you're right, Andy. From last week, I've left a few messages, but none of them seem to be going through. So, not sure what's going on there. But anyway, boys, it's been a good couple of weeks, hasn't it? Really good to see the boys on Thursday night. It was a great atmosphere. Good to see 70,000 at the G on a beautiful balmy night. And I think what all Melbourne supporters wanted was just a levelling out of that standard, and I don't think we played as well as we did against Freo. That was a 4-quarter effort. I think, we played 1 quarter and managed to get over the line with Richmond. So, big test this week again against West Coast to see, what we can put up again, and hopefully, we need to kind of bury a team, don't we? Really, I think to show our wares. But anyway, it's great to get a couple of wins under the belt. It's great to sing the song, and good to see some reward for effort, and hopefully this is the turning. I think if we're realistic, as I think most of us are, we know it's still going to be a tough year, and we probably sit somewhere around, hopefully that 7th to 10th on the ladder. If we can squeeze in, get a final, fantastic. But I think if we're realistic, that's probably where we are. But just wanted to shout out to Bowey. I think he had an absolutely cracking game on Thursday night. Didn't get the chocolates in the Checker Hughes, but I think he did amazingly. So anyway, boys, the 2 minutes is just about up. So we'll catch you again next week, and hopefully this one goes through. Thanks, boys. Always love the pod.
Well, it did go through, and apologies for that. A couple of, if anyone has been trying to get through and hasn't, and we haven't put your voicemail on the air, you know why, but we got this one. There you go. Just to answer Supreme Demon, I think Bowey's probably just behind Max Gawn in the Bluey at the moment, but he'd be up there, definitely top 2 or top 3. George, Jake Bowey's start to the season has been sensational. Career best numbers as rolled off before. Real composure off half-back, playing the role beautifully. Your thoughts on his season to date, and whether you think he is up there for best and fairest?
He is definitely up there as far as one thing only, and that's consistency.
He's been great.
He has been absolutely superb in each and every game that we've played, even if the rest of the team didn't perform as well. I thought he was actually the best player on the ground against Richmond. I would have given him the medal. Then he reminds me, or I think he's sort of at the moment some sort of cross between Michael Hibberd and Jake Lever in his absence. His ability to read the ball, but also his ability to save us when nobody else can save us has been
including one effort. I forget who the player was, but not to give away a free kick, the ball in the air, it was just fantastic.
Yeah, and given his height, he's not tall, but he competes brilliantly. He just reads the play at the moment so well, and then when he gets the ball, he has that composure that is necessary coming out of that half back line in particular to be able to deliver the ball upfield. He's just been superb. Can't praise him enough.
Oh, I totally agree, George. And not just the way he's played, and same with Chandler, I think, too. His application and effort, it has been not just consistent over the 7 games so far, but also in matches. He's in the game all the time. I actually reckon, it's interesting you say Lever, and who was the other comparison? No?
Michael Hibberd.
The other comes to mind, I saw this on Demonland, and I reckon it's a good call, is he's playing similar to how Salo did in 21. Sort of leader down back who's taking on the difficult kicks. And it's interesting because there was a bit of discussion on Demonland that I saw around, and we also last week about Salem's game. I thought it was Salem's best game for quite a long time. And I was really curious. I just looked at the coaches' votes and I hadn't seen them. Coaches' vote where Maxi got 10, Track got 8, and Bowser 6. But then Salem got 2, and Tommy Sparrow got 2, Thompson Dow and Vloston. But I reckon that's the first time Salo's got coaches' vote for some time, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be... Can't recall.
He had 34 possessions, so that could have influenced someone who looked at the stat sheet as well. I'm not saying
that's coach's vote.
To be there, but
And Uze knows. I don't know who
Sparrow,
he's given.
I don't know. Who do you think would have given? Sparrow had 11 or 12 tackles as well, between him and Viner, they had 26 or 27. So it's possible Uze, because he would have had a lot of involvement with Sparrow. He probably thought he's played a really good game. So anyway.
And I thought Sparrow was worthy of a shout out too. His effort, a couple of his effort, the whole game was great, but there were a couple of individual efforts where he gut run to make a contest, which I just love. And the crowd were up and about with those defensive efforts, weren't they, George? They were really sort of cheering defensive work and
and Chandler as well, the same sort of commitment. At times, Sparrow and Chandler and Bowser had no right whatsoever to be in contests, and they halved them at the very least. It was great to watch, for all three of them.
Yeah,
Chandler's really taken a step up this season. Whether it's a leadership thing or just something about his game, he's not just a forward pocket anymore.
Yeah, totally agree.
And speaking to George's point before about the sort of how congested forward lines are now and how important they're for players of the sort of medium player. Like Bailey, I always think of Bailey for some reason for Brisbane, but that sort of how critical they've become. They're almost like the new high half forward. Took a while for everyone to recognise how important high half forwards are. Well, it's now, I think it's those small to medium forwards who can kick goals, and Chandler is one of them. So he's become a really important player, and he's expected to get up the ground like a high half forward and do all of that gut running. So he's been enormous.
Ruse 2 says, Max Gawn admitted in a post-match interview that he struggles with the yips when lining up to goal, close to goal. I went back and compared his technique when he's kicking from the arc to when he's kicking in close. When he's closer in, he slows everything down. His run-up becomes tentative, and he even seems to swing his leg through slower. I might be way off here. I know nothing about the mechanics of AFL kicking, but when you swing a racket or throw a netball, slowing down your natural motion leads to inconsistency and loss of accuracy. Have any of you noticed this with Max's kicking? And before we deep dive into the nitty-gritty of Max's goal-kicking technique, let's just also take a moment to once again marvel, as you've already sort of done it, about Captain Fantastic. And Max is, from mine, he's one of the greatest demons that I've ever seen play. In terms of his ability to impact games, and from the moment that he announced himself in that famous 2015 game down at the Cattery to today, 7 All Australians. He's probably in line for his 8th if he continues on this trajectory. Multiple best and fairest, might get another one. Premiership as captain. He's still dominating games at 33. It's an absolute beast, and last 2 weeks have been nothing short of sensational. But today we're here to talk about the one area of his game that still draws some attention, and that's his goal kicking. B-Man, do you have any notes for Max on his technique?
I do. I reckon, Andy, you're being very humble there. So you picked how long have you been his player sponsor?
Since he came to the club.
Since he came to the club. You've got a good eye, I tell you. It's like as good an eye as I got when I
told you that he was foisted upon us.
Oh, well, you did very well.
We didn't choose him.
Yeah. No,
but I take credit. I take credit for his whole career.
Yeah, except for his kicking.
Except for the kicking.
Well, as for his kicking, I mean, all the best kicks have the exact same routine, whether they're kicking from 50, whether they're kicking from 30. The same thing over and over. I forget who it was. I saw who was kicking on the weekend. Another team spins the ball exactly 10 times, and whatever is. So bottom line, if you've got a different routine from 30 meters as you have from 50, then you're going to be in trouble. I had to laugh on the way home. I listened to, for my sins, SEN call-in radio, and some whacker Melbourne fans out there, I tell you, because they were all like that. I don't know who they decided to put on, but like 3 or 4 Melbourne fans called up, bagged out Goodwin. We've just won our second game in a row. And it was in some reference, I don't know if you heard it, but it didn't seem to me a big deal, but Gawn saying the best coach he's ever had is Choco Williams. And all of these people were calling in about get rid of Goodwin. I mean, I guess that's who gets on the air. Get rid of Goodwin, blah, blah, blah. This is after we've won a game, for God's sake, by nearly 4 goals. So we beat the line. The line was 16, 17 points or something. So we beat the line. And I had to laugh. The reason, the link to Maxi, I said, well, yeah, like people were basically calling. 3 callers said, sack Goodwin now and replace them with Choco. Right, so, do the Melbourne fans not know the bloke's in charge of kicking? It's like we would have won probably the 23 flag if we kicked straight. Give me a spell if his job is kicking coach, and that's his. No knock on Choco. I'm sure he's great for the vibe, but come on, his job's kicking coach, and you can't get Maxi to sort out his actions. So it is a problem. I don't know why they don't have. I don't understand why they don't have players running beside him to take the ball. Same with Viney. Maybe, they don't seem to do it as much as other clubs. I would basically have 3 rules. I wouldn't let Viney kick inside 50. I wouldn't let Steve May kick any shorter than 20 metres. And I would make sure that at every opportunity Max is kicking for goal, that there's a player running beside him. On a more positive note, I didn't think Track had any chance of getting that set shot, and it went straight over the umpire's hat. So that was score 1 for Choco there.
Richmond certainly were well aware of Max kicking for goal, particularly that last one in the last quarter. They had players who were absolutely there to assure that nobody was coming past. But yeah, I'm the same as you, Ben, man. Choco's meant to be teaching kicking technique, and Max's kicking technique from set shots is just awful.
Same as Tracks.
Just awful. The first thing I'd do is I'd be telling him, look at the goal, Max. Do not turn your back on the goal. Do not spin the ball around 10 times in your hand. Try to kick over the man on the mark. Aim for something behind the goals in the middle. Do not aim for the right-hand goalpost, because if you keep aiming for the right-hand goalpost, it guarantees that your technique will continue to be bad.
Well, I reckon he should aim for the right-hand point post.
What he needs to do is aim for the centre of the goals and learn how to kick for the centre of the goals, not try and fix up some problem that he's already got by exacerbating it. But how in the hell someone who's played for that many years can be still doing the same thing time and time again, and again in this game, it just is beyond me.
And it goes to the point, George, is that Sure, like I've been talking about this for ages, how much I love, good kicking in footy, and it's just such a critical part of the game, is that players don't really improve that much their kicking skills. I don't think there's much scope for it, their field kicking. But one thing that they should be able to improve is their set shot, because
absolutely
it's their routine. So you just get a routine that vaguely works and repeat that routine over and over and over. Now, I know that's easy for me to say sitting back here, but like it's the same in golf. It's the same in anything where there's a technique involved, in snooker, in pool, in badminton. You get a good routine and you stick to it. And his routine is all over the shop. He's like on those long kicks outside 50. What seemed to work for a while for him was to arc around and kick on the arc, and he's stopped doing that. That doesn't make much sense.
That's why I said stop doing that. Stop trying to adjust bad kicking technique by pushing it forward again.
Someone stopped him from doing that.
Yeah. Can you have a word to him, Andy, and just ask him if he wants my help?
I don't have the guts, and now that you two have just eviscerated him, you realise why. Before we talked about him, I pumped up his tyres quite a bit coming into it, because I knew there'd be some brutal assessments.
He has to have at least one opportunity for improvement. But on Maxi, I love to see him when he's in good marking form, like Georgie said before. George said before. He's marking. I just love it when he's in good marking form, because that's when he's in his best form. I just love it. Yeah. And he's really more than a ruckman, isn't he? He's like another interesting thing that Melbourne are doing is we're not kicking it down the line to him as nearly as much. And I'm sure that he appreciates not getting smashed in the head every second contest.
So at the moment, he's taking those marks when it's the opposition kicking it straight down his throat.
Yeah.
All right, Doug Remus says, I'm not convinced by Fritsch's performance. Nothing has changed. He kicked a couple of goals, but I still think a good team will run off him and expose his lack of pressure without the ball. Also, did Fritsch's presence impact Fullerton's ability to lead up to the ball? Personally, I'd rather have Melksham in the side over Fritsch based on current form. So, George, what did you make of Fritsch's game? Did you see any real improvement compared to his form before he was dropped? And based on what you saw, does he deserve to hold his spot in the side going forward?
We've just eviscerated Max, so we might as well go for Fritter as well. Absolutely disappointing efforts again from Fritter. When you look around the rest of the forward line, and we've spoken about the pressure that came from Sparrow, this pressure that came from Chandler, the pressure that came from Pickett, and all the other players, and Fritter can't manage a single tackle in a whole game. It just is beyond me. He was sent to Casey because of the same obvious problems. I didn't see anything at Casey which warranted a return, but they put him back and he does the same thing again. It was even doubled up again, particularly when he had that opportunity in the last to kick it to Spargo, who's sitting at the top of the square, and he decided to take a outside of the boot kick around. Spargo gave him absolute curry for it, absolutely laid into him about doing it. And if the coach is trying to build a team ethos, that was the example of exactly the opposite. I spoke before about the change in the way that goals are scored these days. We've spoken about it. Fritter in 2021 in the grand final got all his goals from either a mark inside 50 or spilling out the back.
Or one out. And that's where he's
one out. And you're not going to get those opportunities anymore. They just don't happen in games anymore. So his value to the team will continue to drop, and he'll get more frustrated because he can't get those opportunities that he used to get. I wouldn't be saving a space for him in the side this week.
Look, I'm a huge Fritter fan, and I've never been one to bag players, but I wouldn't have brought him back in. I'm not sure if you heard at the footy. I got there a full 2 hours before the game because I came from work, so I had plenty of time to listen to the radio. And on SEN, they interviewed Jonesy before the game. He was on the ground, and he's mates with Jared Healy, who did the interview. So it was quite a sort of personable interview. Anyway, he was asked directly, like there's pretty much, I'm paraphrasing here, but was First of all, was Melksham managed because of the gash on his knee? And Jones said, yeah, it was actually very serious. He had to go to hospital and have it flushed out to avoid infection.
He was infected, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, to avoid, I'm not sure if he got an infection, but he had to go to. Jones said it was deep, wide, had to get flushed out, and then of course stitched up, and that was really the reason he was managed, so he could have played. But he was asked. Jones was asked directly: was Fritter dropped because of his lack of intensity, and did he, is he lucky to get back in? Was the question. Jones basically agreed with that, both of those things, and that he was his opportunity. Given what we know, Goodwin has been talking. He just, he was quoted in the presser. Our turnaround's about our pressure. It's all about pressure. He didn't show enough pressure to get called up. He was, I thought, lucky to get called up. He had all of, as George said, he had one tackle. He only had 3 pressure acts. For a player playing for, I would have thought his spot on the side. For me, that's, I don't get it. George is right about the way, you're just footy at the moment. You're getting much less opportunities for one-on-one things in the forward line, but that's not the role they're asking him to play anyway. They're asking him to play a high half forward role, which is defensive almost by definition, both in running and defence. And there was right below me where you normally sit, Andy, below where you would be. There was a play that just didn't even get commented on the replay when I watched the replay, but it really frustrated me. So as that high half forward at his height, surely part of his role and one of his key performance indicator would be ensuring the opposition don't take intercept marks. And there was a 2-on-1 contest. I think it was Viney, another shocking kick to inside 50 that went to our disadvantage, where all day, every day, Fritter should have hit that contest and smashed it over the boundary line. Instead, he sat out the back of the contest in the hope the ball would spill out the back and he would get a collect and one of those goals that he likes to kick, which he's brilliant at, but that's not his role. They intercept marked it and brought it up, took it outside of our 50 and brought it up the other end of the ground. And it really, really frustrated me because with no lever in the side, you just got to have all your talls. He's 6'3" or something, Fritter?
186, I think, 187.
So that's what, 6'2", 6'3"?
Yeah, 6'2", 6'3".
6'2", 3 in the old. He should have been smashing that contest, not looking for the cheapie out the back. That's what Cos and small forwards are out there for that, not your medium tall. So personally, I'd be dropping him and bringing in JVR this week.
The other thing, just back to the point about the opportunities presented these days, did you hear the start of Goodwin's, or I think it was the second question in his interview after the game, about when he was asked the question about lowering your eyes?
Yeah,
and he basically shoved it straight down the journalist's throat when he said, that's not the way it happens. Perception is not the reality. These days, people think that you've got to lower your eyes and look for people inside 50. It's not the reality of how goals are scored these days.
No, you just don't get that. Well, like you're saying, you just don't get those lead-up targets at the moment. And, again, it's a reaction. Defensive coaches will sort out this high-scoring business, and defence always swings. The pendulum always swings back to defence, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately Fritter's bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope whatever the case, I put on this in Demonland, it's a bit of a myth about, back in 21, it was never like he was a freewheeling sort of player who was allowed to get away with putting no pressure. I think it's really important point to make about Fritter is the most tackles he's applied except for his first year, 2018, correlates to the most goals he's kicked in a season. So he kicked 55 in 2001, and that was I think it was 55 tackles. I think it was something like that. So his most goals he kicks. It correlates to when he's applying pressure. So it's, you know what I mean? It's like, so I've just read the most goals he's scored in a season is 59 in 2021. He laid 47 tackles that year. The second most goals he scored in a season is 55 in 2022. He laid 37 tackles that year. And the second least number of tackles he's laid is 27 in 23 and 24 when he kicked 39 and 41 goals. So bottom line is the more tackles and pressure he puts on, the more goals he scores. So, you know, he should be focused on doing that. And if he's not doing it, he shouldn't be in the side.
Supreme Demon asks, is Tom Fullerton up to the task of playing as the backup ruck? Or should we play both Tom Campbell and Max Gawn together in the same team? So Bim and we've been asking all year about finding the right backup ruck to support Max, and now that we've had a good look at Fullerton in that role, is he up to it, or should we give Tom Campbell a go, especially considering how well that combo worked in that preseason practice match we saw? And if not Campbell, do we look at recalling JVR after his 5 goals at Casey to have him play forward and then crash and bash in the ruck contest, which we've been against? But what's your take on
short
this,
version is not up to it. I don't think I've seen enough to not rule him out. Hopefully he can go back. He's 27. It's not like he's a 22-year-old kid, or we've got him through the rookie draft and he'll, you know, like Turner, for instance, who hadn't done AFL preseasons, and he's done 6, 7 AFL preseasons. I thought some of his efforts weren't strong enough. Nankervis, I mean, it's no shame to get smashed up by Nankervis, but nonetheless, he's rucking against men at VFL level. You know, not men, I mean, he's a man himself, but he got smashed by Nankervis. So, no, I don't think he's up to it. I cannot see them playing Tommy Campbell and Max in the same side. However, what I wouldn't mind seeing, I just don't know whether it will happen, is that I wouldn't mind them resting Maxi even for this trip. And playing Tom Campbell one out as the ruckman. You mentioned the preseason game. Maxi didn't play in that game. It was Tommy Campbell one out. And so he was, we'll talk about the Casey game. I watched it as well, George, and he was awesome in that game. He's like an old school, it's quite remarkable he's not got more AFL footy, I reckon. Just from what I've seen, Tommy Campbell was he's an old school gun ruckman who uses his body, and he did a most magnificent tap to, I think, Laurie that set up a goal, and it was just a magnificent bit of ruck work. So I don't know whether there's scope for playing him and Maxi in the one side. I don't think they will, just because what's the point practicing a setup you're not going to use when the whips are cracking? I don't know. But I'd be really, really open for them resting Maxi for 2 or 3 weeks or a couple of weeks, maybe around the bye period. I'd even, to be honest, I wouldn't mind seeing him resting Maxi this week and playing Tommy Campbell, because he'll hold his own. And unfortunately, I think it's JVR as a second ruck. You know, like I can't see much another way, because I don't know what you think, George, but I'm not prepared to write Fullerton off completely, maybe another, but I don't think he's the answer as a second ruck, unfortunately.
No, I think the Fullerton like you said, I think he's 27 or something like that. He's 200 centimetres, so's Nankervis, and there's 2 different body shapes there. Yeah, Nankervis is just sheer all muscle and grunt, and Fullerton certainly isn't. There's no more upside to Fullerton. If he wasn't 200 centimetres, you wouldn't be even thinking about him. If you're going to be a ruck at AFL level, you've got to have either huge mobility like a Luke Jackson, you've got to be a huge height like Max, or you've got to be very strong like Nankervis, and unfortunately Fullerton doesn't bring any of those.
Well, although, if he was an excellent natural forward who knocked up kicking goals as a forward, you know what I mean? Like if he was kicking 1 or 2 goals a week and looked the deal, like he not so much looked the deal, but was a powerful enough forward that the opposition had to put a good defender on him, then that might be enough to get him across the line. But he isn't. He doesn't look supernatural as a forward. So
he's not strong enough.
Not strong enough. And it's curious, isn't it? Because Goody puts such a high emphasis on players who are competitive, yet we've traded him in, we've traded Shacky in.
Billings.
Poor Billings, but I'm talking tall.
Buck Naked says, 3 votes to the umpires. The first 5 Tigers goals came from frees. What did you make of the officiating? And Adam the God corrects this, saying 3 of their first 4 goals, not 5. Dina Kilt adds, I listened to AFL Nation as I couldn't watch the game. The commentators felt at times that the umps blew the whistle only after hearing loud crowd protest. They went on to say that when they watch NBA games, referees generally have over 15 years experience, often over 20. They then commented on the inexperience of the umpires at our game, and we have lost a lot of umpiring experience in the last 2 years. AFL Nation said running 15 kilometres per game and each ump expected to take their turn bouncing the ball in the middle loses talent and experience and the game suffers. Last year, the AFL earned $2 billion in revenue and an operating surplus of $45 million. Why isn't there an independent review of officiating? Why don't they make umpires full-time professionals? The clubs can't say anything publicly as discussion of umps is off limits and they risk massive fines. Well, we did win the free kick count on the night, but the state of umpiring has been a topic of concern in recent weeks. I saw a clip of Kane Corns ripping into the umpires today, but all of the footage was from his team's match, and you can guess who he thinks got the raw end of the stick in that one. But George, do you have any? I know you've probably got a lot to add about the state of umpiring in general in the AFL.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate one. We talk about this all the time, and a couple of things. Firstly, the AFL has got a lot to answer for in the way that they treat umpires and what they expect umpires to do, the facilities that they don't have, the training that they don't have, even the money that they don't get to do the job. They make it so damn hard for them. It's not surprising when kids walk away from it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Why do they have to rotate the bouncing of the ball in the middle? Why don't you just give it to someone who can bounce the ball? We know that umpires Nichols and Eleni Gluftis can't bounce the ball, and all that does is get ridicule from the crowd for when the ball goes sideways. So give it to someone who can do the bouncing. There's 4 umpires on the ground. The positioning of the umpires constantly is just appalling. They're just in the wrong spots all the time. Things that the crowd can see, which are blindingly obvious, should be blindingly obvious to at least 2 of the umpires on the ground, but it seems that that's not possible. They finish up doing all the superfluous stuff that detracts from what they're meant to be doing, which is umpiring the game. All this stuff about, you hear it constantly on the mics, kick, yours. What in the hell does that mean? It just means the players kicked the ball outside the 50 and now you're responsible. Does the second umpire need to be told that the ball's been kicked? He can probably see it with his eyes. You hope that he can. What about touched play on even? If it's touched, you don't play a mark. Of course it's play on. If you want to yell play on, feel free. How about outside 5? Everybody's outside 5 if they're not standing on the mark. You don't need to tell everybody about it. Concentrate on watching the guy staying on the mark. Insufficient intent. We've talked about this. Isn't it about time? And even the commentators are starting to comment on it. Why don't you use the same rule as used in VFLW and state grade? If you kick it out or handball it out between the arcs, the opposition get the ball. People don't argue, and the crowds don't yell at them.
Total no-brainer. It's
yeah. And what happens? The crowd goes berserk, or half the crowd goes berserk whenever it's called. And how does the umpire feel about it? Let's make some simple rules for them. Give them a simple job. Give them some decent training facilities, give them some decent coaching, and pay them for the job that they do. As who was it in the D in a kilt mentioned? They've earned $2 billion in revenue, and we're still paying them peanuts to turn up and put up with what they are expected to put up with.
Here, professional is like, I can't believe that we're not doing it. I've said this in previous years, so I'll say it again, is that, there's something like that rule. Like, why don't they do it? Because they love the controversy. They again, it's in the theme of they're happy for the umpires to get bagged, and I won't have it, because it fills up 360, it fills up radio hours, it fills up talkback. It's just, I increasingly think it's not a, what do they say? It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's like Andy, you're right. I thought Richmond fans had more reason to complain in this game. We got some ridiculous free kicks, but again, so did they. In terms of like 4 of their first 6 goals, I think, were from free kicks. I just really can't stand the inconsistency. And they brought 4 umpires in, and there's a lot of talk about the reason they did that is because they're running out of decent coaches. And so they were the best coaches umpires. The best umpires have to umpire multiple games around, or to at least a couple. And so not to burn them out, they brought in the 4th umpire. So the sort of one argument goes, but it just hasn't done anything from my perspective other than increase the inconsistency. And there was a couple of times when you expect a free kick to be paid. There was one time the umpire was about to pay it, had the whistle in his mouth, and changed his mind. Another time there's no, it's really frustrating when the non-officiating umpire calls it, but it's miles away and they're making a decision that, it just is so frustrating, the standard umpiring, and it's getting worse.
Possibly the most inconsistent, and it happens all the time, is the 15 metres.
It's been a shocker this year.
It's terrible both ways for it being not 15 or it is well over 15. Sometimes I've seen a 20-metre kick and it's play on, not 15. I was like, yeah.
It often seems to be ground dependent, like, to be perfectly honest. The kick from Cos to, was it Spargo? No, Chandler. Chandler, that didn't go 15 metres, but it's like inside 50 we'll pay that. So, yeah, it's so, and right across, I've watched a lot of footy this year so far, and right across the games there's howlers being made that are influencing results. I mean, Crows must have voodoo dolls with umpires. So,
I do not feel sorry for them. A couple of years ago, premiership year, was in Adelaide, and the umpire won them the game in the end. For that, I don't feel sorry.
Not deliberate. Yeah.
Before I go to the next question, we'll just add some live breaking news. Well, not actually breaking because it was broken a little bit earlier, but got an email from club president Brad Green. He's written a letter to the members about our new CEO. Dear members, I'm thrilled to share some exciting news. After a comprehensive nationwide search, the Melbourne Football Club begins an exciting new chapter today with the appointment of Paul Guerra, is that how you say it, as Chief Executive Officer. We set out to secure the best possible leader for our future, and we've found that person in Paul. Paul is a highly respected CEO with a proven track record of results in member organisations. His vast experience and deep business connections, people-first approach and alignment with our values makes him the standout choice. The board will fully resource and empower Paul to ensure our football programs and all aspects of the club are fully supported to drive our next phase of growth. Paul joins the club from his current role as CEO of the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where he delivered strategic growth, strengthened stakeholder relationships and fostered a high-performance culture. I'd like to recognise and thank David Chippendale for guiding the club with authenticity and composure during his period. He's an exceptional leader and a highly valued member of our executive team who has led with care and diligence while serving as interim CEO. Paul will hit the ground running and members will have opportunities to hear directly from him very soon. Thank you as always for your loyalty and support. I look forward to seeing you at the footy soon. Go D's. Brad Green, President, Melbourne Football Club. George, anything about
no,
CEO?
No, nothing. But
Only say nice
as that
things.
letter was halfway through, I was thinking, was this written by ChatGPT as well?
Possibly, I can do that on the fly. I think. But big man, do you know anything about Paul?
Paul Guerra? No, I don't. No, I didn't even realise our stand-in CEO was David Chippendale, but I hear he's a good dancer.
Yes,
and Guerra is war in Italian, so that might be.
Yeah, promising. I was trying to make a gag out of Guerra, but like there was a Hawthorn player, Guerra, wasn't there?
Yep.
One of my friends told me that he's director. He was director of Racing Victoria, so that could help us out with the Caulfield Racecourse if he has.
Oh, there we go. I was about to say, surely in his opening letter to members, he'll be promising a
I'm sure.
home ground training ground.
Except if it's from the
Expect
Flemington
an announcement soon.
We're going to move to Moonee
soon.
Valley.
Yeah.
As soon as I know, you'll know. Heard that one before. Travi14 says, I do have one real concern, and that's our midfield mix. We're trying different things, which we absolutely need to do, but it still feels like we only regain real control when Petrarca, Oliver and Viney are back together in there. I have faith that Langford will eventually reach the level we need, but beyond him, I'm not so sure. Rivers will become a solid midfielder in time, but I think he'll be more of a reliable role player, and he still needs to sharpen up his short passing. I'm more confident that Lindsay and Windsor will eventually become full-time mids, but it looks like they'll spend a couple of years learning their craft across half-back first. Big man, I reckon Travi14 might have overlooked Cozzy's impact at centre bounces in his analysis. What did you make of that take of his, and what's your view both on our current midfield setup and how you see it shaping up in the future?
I mean, it's not like track Oliver and Viney are like 33, 34, 35. That's late 20s. So, they've got another 2-3 seasons of high-level footy, or more if you look at the calling. I mean, look at the leader in the coaches' vote at the moment is Sidebottom, I think. He's like 34 or something. So that doesn't worry me so much. And I think that we've got a number of, as Travi14 notes, but, I think ultimately Windsor could play middle. He's a tough bugger. I reckon Colt's a Monty for going into the middle. I've got increasingly high hopes that Seston will make it, and I reckon he's someone who could either be a a sort of half forward, medium forward, and then spend some time in the middle. Personally, I don't like Rivers in the middle. I like him at halfback flank. I know that Rivers wants to play middle in the midfield, so he's always going to be able to get some midfield minutes. I just prefer him down back and the way he plays. There was talk for a while about McVie. Similarly, I like McVie back, but I actually think we're okay midfield-wise in terms of the players coming through. Langford is huge. He's a massive fella. He's 19, 2-3 more years of pre-seasons. He's going to be an absolute monster. He'll get taller. He'll get heavier. He's like track on steroids. You know what? No, take that back. That's a joke. He's like track, but beast mode. And I reckon Lindsay will end up being, he played some of his footy as an inside mid as well. And so, don't sleep on him getting some midfield minutes. So, but as you note, Cozzy, he had 13 centre bounce appearances in this game. In fact, I looked at it before. I might be wrong. I'll find it in a sec. I think he had the most centre bounce. Here it is.
I saw one of the footy shows talking about him. He's been to the most centre bounce attendances of all of our midfields. That was before this week.
Yeah, he had 12 in this game. He's averaging 55.7 of our centre bounces attendances Cozzy's been at compared to only 30. Sorry?
You go.
No, Cozzy. So Cozzy this year, 55 of our centre bounces, 55.7% of the time Cozzy's been in there, compared to last year only 33%. So he's been massive. So in this, funnily enough, because Gawn was rested, I guess, the centre bounce attendances were curious in this game. 21 for Viney, 19 for Oliver, 19 for Track, which speaks to Travi14's point, I guess. 18, Max was fourth. So it just shows how Fullerton had 6. So, but Cozzy was down there in fifth with 12. And I think from memory, he had 18 last week. So, he's actually become a very important part of our midfield makeup, and I think as large part as anything because he's got wheels.
that centre bounce makeup because he's not playing as a mid. He's going to the centre bounce and then drifting.
Yeah. Well, it depends how you define it. I mean, he's in mid when he's taking the centre bounce. That's exactly right. He's not doing much around the ground except for inside 50 stoppages. So he does his fair share of them, obviously. But you're right. He goes to the centre and then he's going back into the forward line. But still, that's that's a pretty high number for this year. He's up 85% basically. 55. Over half of our centre bouncers he's in there this season. So, compared that to, say, Clayton's only 71%. So it's not like, Track 65%. Langford didn't have any centre bounce attendances in this match, which was curious. And Lang did only one, George. But Langford eventually will get a bit more time. He had much more time than that previously. So, they only used 6 players, including Fullerton, 7 players, Langdon with 1 in this match. So they did actually rely really heavily on the old brigade in this game.
Let's get into Casey. The Casey Demons delivered a powerhouse.
Andy, just before we jump into that, there's a comment in the chat room from Spargonicus. Shout out to Spargonicus and his lovely partner, Sparganet, was it?
Sparganet.
About that touch by Cozzy says, I beg to differ, fellas, and is definitely a deviant. Oh, sorry. I beg to differ, fellas, definitely deviated is what Sparganet said. So definitely moved.
I did get a new prescription on my glasses. So it's either not working or working too well. By the way, AI Detector says 72% of that letter was likely written by AI. 10 out of the 12 sentences are likely AI generated. I don't know how accurate that is. It is an online
Is Guerra an AI agent?
Well, he didn't write the thing, so someone at the footy club did. But AI can be a very powerful tool, so it doesn't mean because someone uses it, it's I have used it on emails before just to spruce and spice things up a little bit. It's not necessarily a bad thing. The Casey Demons delivered a powerhouse performance in their Anzac Day round 5 clash, crushing Richmond by a massive 118 points at Casey Fields to register their biggest win of the 2025 VFL season to date. Despite some blustery conditions that contributed to a scrappy opening term, Casey quickly shifted gears. Using the win to their advantage in the second quarter, the Demons slammed on 4 unanswered goals to take firm control of the match, and from there, the margin only grew. Jacob Van Rooyen led the charge up forward with a dominant 5-goal haul, showcasing some strong marking and clinical kicking after a nervy start. His commanding second and third quarters signalled a return to form that will have Melbourne selectors taking notice. He was ably supported by Adam Johnson and Mitchell Hardy, who each added 3 goals, while Bailey Laurie, Jack Henderson and Paddy Cross chipped in with 2 apiece. In the midfield, Casey's dominance was total. Riley Bonner was outstanding, amassing an incredible 44 disposals, including 28 by halftime, driving Casey's quick ball movement. Hardy, 37 disposals, backed up his goal-scoring feats with a huge presence around the ground, while Laurie, 35, Baldy, 33, and Tajwa Woden and Oliver Seston, both 28, were prolific contributors. Kind of Brown also impressed, particularly with a strong third quarter burst. Casey's clearance dominance inside 50 count reflected their midfield ascendancy and forward half control, turning the match into a virtual training drill after half time. And down back, the lopsided nature of the game didn't require any heroics, but there were strong signs of growth. Youngsters Jed Adams and Ollie Seston showed they're adapting well to senior football, while Matt Jefferson and Luca Kempfield continued their development. Tom Campbell, celebrating his 150th VFL game, was a vital presence in the ruck with 17 disposals, 20 hitouts and a goal, mentoring rising ruck Will Varell, who also found the scoreboard. The Demons' 118-point win not only handed Richmond their heaviest loss of the modern VFL era, but also gave Casey strong confidence boost after a heavy defeat just 5 days earlier. And the only downside to an otherwise perfect day was that Casey now heads into another bye, potentially halting their hard-won momentum. George, did you happen to watch anything?
Yeah, I watched a lot. I thought this was a very, very strange game in that both teams could only manage 1 goal in the first quarter, and then Casey piles on 20 in the next 3.
Howling wind.
Yeah, but it was what was surprising to me was when I was watching the whole game, Richmond looked competitive, except that Casey just kept on scoring goals, goal after goal after goal. And I thought, why are they so far ahead on the scoreboard? Because they don't seem to be that far ahead around the ground. Which, like I said, Richmond seemed to be reasonably competitive. But back to the individual, JVR was an absolute standout. I don't think there will be any doubt that he comes back this week. 5 goals in the match. I think every single one of the goals was from kicking from 50 or thereabouts.
40, 50. It should have been 6 too.
Yeah,
he took a beautiful mark and the ball was reversed. He had 50, would have been in the goal square.
Yeah, Laurie caused that, but yeah, it would have been 6. But every one of his shots was absolutely bullet straight. It was just JVR back to his best. More importantly, he was working up around the ground as well.
And leading up at the ball.
At
least 3 of his goals were lead up forward marks. On that, George, before you go on, is the wind was super. I watched the whole game too, and the wind was super, super strong. And his a bit like I was saying before about Maxi, his technique was so strong that kicking into the wind, where everyone's ball was getting dragged. I forget which way, but it was super. Not only did he kick straight, he had to bend it around for to take in the wind. It was just his kicking was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a delight to watch, and you're absolutely right. Proper technique, particularly for someone who has to kick goals, is absolutely essential, and he showed it in this game. He was just superb. Plenty of other worthwhile ones. I was really impressed with Adams and Kentfield in the back line. The marking that they took, they were really strong, contested pack marks quite often. So both of those players are developing nicely.
I think I'm pretty right in saying that most of his junior footy and senior footy is forward.
Yeah, yep. But he seems to be finding a role down there. And given the development needs that we had at Casey, I don't see Kentfield being moved forward in the short term. I think he's finding a very good niche down back at the moment. So others, really impressed with Aidan Johnson again. Absolutely goes hell at the gate with every time he has the opportunity. I think he kick 4 goals, 5 or something ridiculous.
Yeah. He likes to kick the leather off it.
He does. Yeah, never. Yeah, there's no halfway. It's just 100% all the time, kicking for goal or going for the opposition. I think that might be very useful to us when we get to the who comes in component.
And just on him, George, is that he's got to be ahead of Fullerton, doesn't he?
Oh, he's miles ahead of Fullerton, and sadly, he's miles ahead of Jefferson. Jefferson was
who played the first half in defence, and
then and then got moved forward and did absolutely nothing. Absolutely, it was just the Jeffo story that we've heard before. Marking doesn't take the first grab, no second efforts, and in a game that your team is won by 118 points, you should be kicking a few goals. Everybody else was, but it was really, really disappointing to see that. Again, I was impressed with Cully. His coverage over the ground is huge. He'll be down the forward line, threatening to kick goals, and then he'll be up the other end 5 seconds later doing a defensive effort. So really great running. He's obviously needs a little bit more time to get his tank up a bit, but if he continues to show what he's showing down there, I suspect he's already ahead of people like Woden and ahead of Laurie and probably Kine and Brown, and it won't be long till we see Cully in the seniors as a result. But
I agree, George, and I think as large part exactly what you've been talking about, those medium, small forwards, he's hard at it and he's smart, he makes good decisions, and I think that I can see him in that senior forward line for sure.
Yep. I think that's about all, really. Billings was Billings, can't kick 40 metres, but we knew that already.
He played all right. But the player that I've got a big watch on is Seston. He's starting to look closer to AFL level fitness. He's been playing at halfback flank. He's a bit like Cully. He makes good decisions with ball in hand, and he's a neat kick. I think if he can get his tank up they had high hopes for him, bring him in. He was a bit of a long shot when they drafted him. Was he rookie draft or no? He wasn't, but they late draft in one of the draft pick. But yeah, I like him at halfback flank, but I think ultimately he'll go forward as well, and it might be another one of those sort of medium small forwards that every team needs, who can apply pressure. And I quite liked his game. And but just pick up one of your points is I thought Adams, that was the best I've seen Adams, and he also made good decisions.
Yeah.
How? What did you think of his game?
He was taken off. Was it at halftime? He was that travelling emergency. I don't know why they do that, but anyhow, they won't have the opportunity this week.
And the other one you missed was, I thought Laurie had a good game, but I was super impressed by Tom Campbell and Varel. Was probably as good as I've seen Varel play as well. I mean, they all probably look good when you're winning 118 points, but
Campbell looked particularly good and around the ground as well. That role of taking the marks, when needed, sort of thing. But yeah.
And it was really noticeable, and we've talked about this before, is why it's important Campbell's at the club, is practicing the way the seniors want to play. The forward handballs were really, really noticeable in the Casey game, and a lot of the scoring chains were on the back of those long forward handballs and chaining up down the ground. So even into the wind, we kicked, I think in that second quarter, in the first quarter we were kicking into the wind, only kicked one, but in the third quarter I think we kicked 5 or 6 into the win.
All right, let's talk changes. D's fans will be waiting anxiously for updates on any potential casualties from last Thursday's ANZAC Eve clash. Stephen May left the ground with an ankle concern, but returned to play before being managed through the second half of the final quarter. Daniel Turner could also be available for selection, having completed 12-day concussion protocols following the head knock he sustained against Fremantle. And meanwhile, Jake Milksham, who missed last week's game due to an infection or possible infection, or from a cut received in the Dockers match, is another possible inclusion. And adding to the selection mix, as we've just talked about, Jacob Van Rooyen has thrown his name into contention after booting 5 goals in a dominant performance for Casey. It's a big man followed by George, who's coming in, who's going out for our upcoming match against the Eagles at Optus Stadium in Perth on Saturday evening.
How about we do it a bit differently this week, Andy?
Do it however you want.
Well, this depends on you. George and I will say who's coming out, who's coming in, and you've got to say who's coming out for him, because I never know that way. But I 100% agree with George. There's not a snowflake's chance in hell of JVR not coming back in. Deserves his call up. Was arguably unlucky that Fritter got the call up ahead of him. Neither did a huge amount the previous week at Casey, I don't think, really. He has to come in on the back of that. He will have had things to work on. Not only did he kick 6, they weren't easy goals, like George said. They weren't at Joe the Gooses out the back. Worked hard for them, led up the ground. His marking was good. His leadership on the ground was good. His body language was spot on. He is a must to come back in. Plus, he's a WA boy, and the club's been really good with that sort of stuff over the last couple of years. I'm pretty sure that they'll be keen for him to play in front of his fans. So he'll definitely come in. I think Turner definitely comes in. So I think Turner is, important part of our, I think particularly with Lever not playing, we need another tall down there. They've got 2 tall. Well, it depends where they play Oscar Allen. They played him in defence.
They've actually got 3 talls still.
Yeah, so I think,
even with Oscar Allen down the other end, they've still got 3 talls.
Yeah, so I think Turner has to come back in, and I want him in the side anyway. I think he was excellent in that first half before he copped the concussion. And there's someone missing that I thought would come back in. Well, they're the 2 definite ins, I think. The query, I'm not convinced Melksham will come back in, only because... Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave who's going to go out to you, Andy. But I reckon the definite coming in.
Fullerton comes out.
Fullerton. That's one. Yeah. Who do you reckon will come in, George?
JVR definitely comes in. I'd also bring Turner back in because they've got, like I said, Williams, Waterman, and Archer Reid. So Reid's 203, so he's a big unit. We need to be able to defend that. Down forward, JVR comes in, I'd also bring in AJ
Right.
in lieu of Fullerton, and I wouldn't bring Melcham back in, and I'd be dropping Fritsch.
Yeah.
So you go a little bit taller in the forward line because we're getting everything we need out of the people like Chandler and Pickett and Sparrow and Spargo. We probably need that extra tall, and AJ provides another backup ruck option for us rather than having to throw JVR in.
So if it's JVR, Turner, and AJ, 3 have got to come out, Andy.
Well, Fullerton, definitely. Well, if you're going to bring in that extra, if you're going to bring in those 2 forwards, and I guess then that sort of says that Fritsch will come out, but I don't know whether he will, though.
That's a 2. So who's the third? I reckon it'll be interesting. That'll be a really interesting call.
I don't know.
Sharp.
Because it's Turner. Well,
Sharp.
So I saw someone on Demonland, Sharp out.
Well, we've been
Colt
sort
to
of
the bench,
using we've been using sort of the subs, Colt, Sharp, sort of been interchanging. So I don't know how you sort of can't have a big guy as a sub.
Colt would be a good. I reckon Colt's an excellent sub. Because he brings
An
energy
impact
straight
player.
away. He can play in multiple positions. He can play forward. He can on a pinch go on the ball. Yeah, that's probably a good. AJ would mean also, a good game to bring AJ in if you're going to bring him in to smash into their players and to not.
Yeah,
we all want JVR just to be given some time to be a forward, don't we?
Yeah, and I can't remember who was their second ruck. I think they might have even used Waterman at one stage for their second ruck. Flynn's their first ruck.
Yeah.
But I can't remember who they used as their second ruck.
Well,
so AJ's not going to have to come up against someone
that's right.
who's big, yeah.
And he is a goal. He's not a bad goal kicker either. He kicks goals at VFL level, and as you said, he's kicked 5 or 6. He could have had a lot more. Yep. Yeah, and he ticks the box for sort of competitiveness, doesn't he? So that would be a good. Yeah, I'd be happy with those 3, and I'd definitely be dropping Fritter. You won't get any. Sorry, Andy.
It's going to be a cool night that night. It doesn't look like any rain. It looks like there's rain the previous night, but to clear by the morning. But it's going to be like 15 degrees and dropping.
In terms of this game, you won't get any argument from me, George, on this one. Is about the strength of our opposition. They are woeful.
Let's just go into. I'll give you a bit of a preview, and then you can talk about it. The Demons face a potential danger game. Talk about woeful as they head west to take on the Eagles. Memories of last year's clash in Perth still linger for many Melbourne fans, with that ill-fated defeat marking the beginning of the Demon slide in 2024. On that fateful day, a young Eagle, Harley Reid, put on a midfield clinic against stars Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver, setting the tone for a tough second half of the season. And while Melbourne avenged the loss later in the year with a win at the MCG, it wasn't enough to turn their season around. And this time, the Eagles enter the match as the competition's only winless side. But with the memory of last year's upset on their home deck, they'll be eager to claim their first scalp of 2025. And the Ds will need to be on high alert. Big man, you've already started. You've called them woeful. What do you have to say?
Like some of these low ranking
famous
numbers.
Last words.
16th in contested possessions per game, 16th in uncontested possessions per game, which is an interesting combination, 16th in effective disposals per game, 17th marks inside 50. As George noted, they've got 3 tools up there, and they're 17th in marks inside 50.
It'll all change this week. Go on.
18th in tackles inside 50 per game. It goes on and on. And, they're really, in addition to that, they're coming off, it'll be a 5-day break, 6-day break. They played to Sunday. Is that I can never work out. Is it 5 days or is that 6 days?
Six in my book. 6. We've just come off a 5-day break.
Yeah.
So they've got 6 days. We've got 10 days. They're flying back from, they played Sunday afternoon against the Hawks, coming back. So midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning back. Might as well be as good as 5 days. That's really tough for them. It depends. We might take the opportunity to put some heavy loading in and be buggered, but I hope not, because this is a real opportunity to get a percentage boost for sure. And because they really, it's a bit hard to work out. Like, he's coming from a long way back with his team, McCalder. They're pretty average. It's hard to look at what their method is. It's hard to really definitively say they've got X game plan. They are, the McCalder's definitely trying to make them more of a transition team. But it seems to me they're coming from a long, long way back to being in a position where they're finals ready. I don't know. What do you reckon, George?
Yeah, they are seriously down the bottom and not just scraping the barrel. I think the bottom of the barrel fell out. If it wasn't for McGovern playing in that side, they'd have some real big blowouts. They've won 2 quarters for the whole season. That tells you how bad they are. In the game against Hawthorn, the Hawks, for example, had 7 marks inside 50 in the first quarter alone. That tells you how loose they are. Yeah, but that tells you how loose they are. It was just witches' hats, quite frankly. Absolutely witches' hats in this game. I don't know that you can do any real statistical analysis of a game like this when there just wasn't anything being put up against them. The Hawks, they've got these 3 talls. Waterman was an absolute pain in the bottom to us the last time we played him. But other than that, I think Ryan got most of the goals for them in this game, again, the small forwards. But, the game was over, quite literally over in the first quarter against the Hawks. So they really don't have anything. They've lost all the players from their the people like the Darlings, and they've lost the Gaffs, and they've lost the Barras as their other backman. They've just lost players all over the ground that have kept them in the games in the last couple of years. They were never challenging, but even kept them in the games. They just haven't got them. Even Harley Reid, in this game that I watched against Hawthorn, he wasn't the same player as he was last year.
And his body language, his whole way of playing at the moment. Yeah, he's doing his reputation no good at all. I don't reckon.
Yeah,
he's angry.
He's angry all the time. He doesn't look fit. Yeah, he's getting rattled.
It's not surprising for a good young player in a really lousy side to be feeling that. They want to lift the side. They expect others to be doing better, but he just looks awful himself.
So no argument from me whatsoever. 2 of their better players are Cripps and Hunt. I'm not knocking Hundy. He's one of my all-time favourite Ds, but, Cripps, he's probably not really up there with his best, but he's kicking goals and he's still in the, but he's long past it. So it's a bit hard to see the way forward for them. If this is a danger game in the sense, if we were to lose this game, especially after announcing a new CEO, it would be really, really bad outcome for us where we're at. There's no easy games. That's a cliche, but with a 6-day break, maybe 5.5, can we compromise on us with 10 days? With players, we're getting closer to our McVie. I thought was serviceable, but he'll really do. He'll appreciate having 1 game under his belt. He also goes home. We've got a good crew of Colt won't get dropped, so he's a WA boy too from Esperance, isn't he, down south?
That's correct.
Good crew of Western Australian boys back at our home ground. Yeah, so I think it's a real chance to hopefully they'll open up and look to really play fast. That's what I'm looking for. I can't say I just don't think even West Coast have the wherewithal to do what Richmond did that because that requires high level running to flood back the way they did. I just don't know that West Coast are fit enough to do that, George, in terms of even if they wanted to chip it around. And so, I really, really hope we attack hard and really look to score heavily from the back half, move it quickly, gives JVR some good looks. The weather's going to be good, and hopefully JVR, can kick some confidence goals. And I really want to see JVR and Petty to get up forward again. I really like that combination. Turner goes back. As I said, wouldn't be annoyed if they dropped Maxi, rested Maxi and played Tommy Campbell, but I don't reckon Maxi would allow that to happen. He probably makes his own decisions on that stuff. So I'm looking forward to a victory. My only query is, do I watch it live or as live? So that might come down
or watch the election.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll be done and dusted by then, George. I reckon it might be come 7:30. We might have a result.
In the game as well as the election?
Well, like footies, like politics, we'll know early on. We'll know in the first 15 minutes. And I reckon we might have an idea by what time's game time? 7:30?
7:35, I think, or whatever.
I reckon maybe another hour or so we'll know that Albo's got another 4 years.
All right, I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down that match against the Eagles in Perth. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was Marooned in NZ. Thank you to our voicemailer Roadstar. And thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. They're an integral part of the show. So thank you to Dina Kilt, D Minion, Buck Naked, Pingu, Palace D, Sir While You Little, Lazy, Smurf, Supreme Demon, Ruse 2, Doug Reamer, Jaden, H10, Go Lordy, Adam the God, and Travi 14. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and Beerman. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout out on the next show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.